Last week, I had the pleasure of returning to Ghana, my parents' birthplace. My visit was on behalf of the UK charity AfriKids to launch their Time to Shine campaign. There's no question, Ghana's on the rise. In the last year alone, leaders and dignitaries, including Prince Charles, Angela Merkel, President Macron, and even US First Lady Melania Trump, have all flocked to the country. However, this new boom hasn't reached the northern part of the country where I visited. There I encountered families who live on less than $2 a day and children as young as 5 who are forced to work just to be able to eat. But what struck me most was that with even all of these obstacles, these children are dedicated to their education and prepared to do whatever it takes to stay in school. With truancy levels and exclusion rates on the rise here in the UK, I believe a cultural exchange programme between kids from Britain and those in poorer countries would go a long way to fixing some of our issues. Britain ranks 22nd in literacy and 27th in numeracy in OECD countries. Perhaps it's time we learn from Africa.
I was following your trip to Ghana with great interest, June, and I completely agree with you.
As a fellow Ghanaian.
Myself, and it's interesting to see that actually Ghana spends more, both as a percentage of GDP and as a percentage of government expenditure on education than the UK. And this is a country that until not long ago was a highly indebted poor country. So while Ghana's story of coming out of that situation, becoming a middle-income country is laudable, it's also interesting to see how much education's been prioritised at a time when in the UK, we have failed generations of children now. And, you know, I used to be the education editor here at Sky News. I've done a lot of reporting on education. One thing I found in all countries that have successful education systems, whether that's Finland, whether that's Singapore, whether that's Japan, the one thing they have in common is a long-term strategic cross-party agreement on education policy. In Britain, not only do we radically change our education policy with every change of government, even with every education secretary, when Michael Gove, Nicky Morgan, each of them would turn the system on its head, and it causes such misery for teachers, such confusion for pupils, and it's the absolute opposite of a long-term strategic vision as to how we can give young people what they need at a time when the skills they need are changing radically. And that's going to be the challenge for Ghana as it is here, because they now have a very rigorous education system. In fact, I've got friends who have moved to the UK from Ghana and said that their children are totally under-challenged at school. The standards here are lower, the expectations are lower than in Ghana. But we all now need to work out how we can bring our kids up to speed for a digital, automated economy.
Well, this was what I was so impressed by. I was in, like, the poorest villages you can imagine, and yet there was such a focus on STEM. I want to show you a wonderful girl I met. I've nicknamed her Malala from Ghana. Her name's Blessing. Take a look.
My name is Anita Blessing. I'm a girl of 14 years of age. I came from Belensa, a small village in Sandema, and I wish to be a doctor in future.
I love this. Now, Blessing, you've been participating in our girls' education program. How important do you think education is for girls?
Education is so much important for girls. It helps to build our courage and our esteem, and it makes us feel good wherever we are.
Look at that. Be a panellist on the plane.
That's what I'm saying. We all need to go home.
I absolutely loved. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Africa.
And in Ghana.
Around that part of the world, I was called Tababu.
Lovely.
That was my nickname. You know what Tababu means, don't you?
No.
Okay, it means white man. White man Phil.
Tababu
Phil was my nickname.
Oh, in our language, it's Brawny.
Okay.
White man is Brawny.
Anyway, but my point being,
I've got a word in my language, but we'll just we'll gloss over that.
Right. My point being, the kids over there genuinely want to go to school.
Yes.
Right. My kids genuinely don't want to go to school. And a lot of kids over here genuinely do not want to go to school. And that is a huge, huge difference. Right? These kids over there know, and they're told from a very early get-go, all right, even though they've got to do the rest of their chores around the house and all the stuff that they do, if they don't get an education, they've got absolutely no way of bettering themselves. Whereas our kids can sit at home and in some cases, throughout their whole lives, don't have to lift their finger and they'll get chicken nuggets fed and the rest of it for the rest of their lives. It ain't on. It ain't on. You've got to incentivise them. However, when kids do extremely well,
home life
when
is
kids
just
do
so
extremely
fantastic.
well, all right? So it's like we almost cap how clever our kids can get. Bring back the grammar school, I say, and I know Nick will support that.
I agree entirely.
Okay, you agree with me?
Until you said grammar school.
No, we can't agree on everything, can we?
You can't agree on everything.
You have an extraordinary life. 1 minute you're in the poorest part of the... Next you're in Davos. I mean, your carbon footprint must be the size of Latvia. It's quite incredible.
I've planted a lot of trees.
Well, that's all right. All I would say is, Afua, I see the tables, I study the tables, and I did quite a bit of this on my radio show. Be careful what you might wish for, because Singapore, sadly, has some of the highest instances of youth emotional health, mental health issues, because they're drill. Yeah. We need to be somewhere in between. We don't need the laziness that not your children, but the British children, where they won't know what they've got till it's gone, to use that old expression. These lovely little kids, they are so grateful because they've not had what we have taken for granted for decades, but we don't necessarily want to completely follow.
And that's why I believe we need a cultural exchange programme, because our kids would learn a lot from them too.
I took my son to Gaza Strip when he was probably about 10 or 11 years old, and I showed him how the other half were living. And from that day, he came home and he's like, "Whoa, I've got to do something about myself," and it actually kicked him in. That boy in school and all that sort of stuff did really well.
Just for some context, just before you come in, Trevor, I agree that we shouldn't necessarily copy or emulate everything that the most successful countries, according to the tables, are doing. But the UK is currently 27th in the world for maths, and 22nd in the world for reading. That's according to the PISA and OECD study of 15-year-olds from more than 70 countries. We are. It's a real disgrace, given our wealth, given our resources, given our history of actually having much higher standards, how much things
I love what the Ghanaian math has brought into the table today.
You can say that.
but I would just counsel against reducing this again to more spending, or the government's got, or whether you have grammar schools or not, because the truth is that actually what makes a difference is not just money, but also what families do. And you can have the children doing cultural exchanges, but I suspect the people who are the most important here will be the parents. In Shanghai, the average amount of homework done across the globe is about 5 hours a week. In Shanghai, they do 14 hours a week. Wow. In South Korea, they only do 3, but families spend up to about 25% of their income on private tuition. And that's all a decision of the family. So I would say what this is telling us is something about family life as much as it is about government policy.
The importance of dad, which is how we started.
Well, the importance of whole... Because actually one of the interesting things about Ghana, I looked up, which really surprised me. I always associate educational failure with, single parents and so on. Households. Interestingly, in Ghana, 45% of children do not live in a household with 2 parents. Yet they have this incredible performance.
No, but you have to add to that. But it's not because of the breakdown of the family. Most of the time it's because of poverty. So therefore another parent is living somewhere else to work in the city to send back. So they still have an influence on their children's lives. And it's a matriarchal society. The women run the show.
Yeah, so they've got something to teach us about how to deal, how family life can be configured in a way to support children.
And because we have the extended family as well. Yeah.
I mean, not to paint the Ghanaian system with rose-tinted lens, because it does have problems. But I think this is, in a way, also an example of something sociologists talk about, which is that education is not just content that you give to children. It's in a cultural context. And all the countries that are most successful, they ground education in a cultural context that is relevant to children. And I think there's some interesting messages there about why it is that minority children don't do so well in countries like Britain and in America, because they are part of an education system that is not necessarily catering to their cultural needs. It's not offering them role models or people they can relate to. And the evidence shows that they don't see. Now, you take Ghana, it's not about being black, it's not about having only one parent at home. Ghana, they have both, but they are thriving, and that's because there have been leaders in Ghana who have decided to try and shape Ghanaian education so that it meets the needs of Ghanaians.
OK, we've got pretty much to the end of our time, but before we go, a couple of things. It's never easy starting a new job. You've got to figure out your way around the office, learn everyone's names, most importantly, find out where the coffee machine is. But it's made even harder when people won't stop bringing up what you used to do, as my old friend Sir Nick Clegg knows all too well. Here's what happened when he was asked a question by the Daily Telegraph's James Crisp during a press conference in his new role as Head of Global Policy and Communications for Facebook.
You currently work for Facebook, which a lot of people in Brussels blame or take solace in the idea that Facebook was responsible for the Brexit vote. Previously, you worked with David Cameron and put him into government, and some people would say on the path towards the Brexit referendum. So my question is, do you ever worry that you are a Brexit enabler? And secondly, what exactly is the going rate for a Deputy Prime Minister these days? Thank you.
No, I don't. Next question.
For that icy reaction, Sir Nick, you get our blunt answer. Wasn't that great?
That's fantastic.
Actually, I wish he did more of that when he was Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Just sorted out Cameron and Osborne.
No, I think he's gotten a little bit tougher with this new Facebook paycheck, isn't it? It's kind of...
I think the guy who asked that question should get straight interviewer of the week.
OK, now we've been talking about children, and it's a special day for one of our younger panellists. During this recording, Nick Ferrari has turned 60.
Well,
exactly. So,
here we go.
Happy birthday
Thank you very much.
Here we are.
Thank you very much. Does it explode in my face or something like that? I know. When I cut into it, Greg Dyke pops out. Is that what happens? Thank you very much.
And are you feeling that you're entering a new phase of life, Nick?
I'm looking forward to the next 60 years.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm going to look at it. Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Wait till you get to my age, and the knees are killing you. Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's it for this week's programme, but you can join in. But you can join in the debate. Oh, I beg your pardon. You can join in the debate by searching for The Pledge on Facebook or Twitter. See you next time.
Thank you very much, everybody.